Thank you very much. I'm still having some trouble getting my mind wrapped around social media and two teenagers in the house, having lived through that myself, so all I can say is good luck to you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gary Brown, and I am a Focal Point business coach, as Carla mentioned. You should be looking at my contact information on the screen at the moment. I would say that if you're having trouble hearing, would you just wave, and I'll try to correct for the volume. It is my pleasure, in fact, to be here this afternoon as part of the Small Business Solver webinar series. And on behalf of everyone involved with Small Business Solver, I'd certainly like to offer you all best wishes in the pursuit of your business goals during the current year 2014. So today's session is entitled Action Planning, as you're aware. But planning is only part of the process needed to be successful. And I want you to think of this as part of an iterative process, really, that is fulfilled only when the goal has been achieved. So the session is scheduled to last for 30 minutes. I'll be speaking for about 20 of those minutes. The balance of the time is set aside for any questions or comments. And I'll remind you, as Carla has already said, the session is being taped for future access. And if needed, you can certainly reach me in the event that you have any outstanding questions that may have not been addressed during our conversation today. So with that having been said, let's get started. You're looking at a slide that says 2014. We've all just collectively turned the page on a new calendar. And what are we looking at? We're looking at 12 blank pages, one for each month of the year. So it's really a great time to give some thought to the personal and business targets that you would like to hit this year. But hitting targets is, as I've already said, is really part of a larger process. And the next slide, drum roll please. There we go. This slide illustrates the nature of the action planning process that we're going to be discussing this afternoon. So if you take a look at this, starting on the more or less the top left side of the screen at about what will we call that 10 o'clock, I suppose, you'll see the word goal setting. And that is where we've started the process. So we need to decide upon a target. And we achieve this as we assess various possibilities looking out to 2014 in terms of what we'd like to achieve. And we put these possible objectives through both our thinking and our feeling filters. And if the particular objective passes through those filters, then we'll accept it as one of our goals. And this filtering process, by the way, may or may not be a conscious effort on our part, but it does indeed take place. You might be able to say to yourself, well, I just know it feels right. And that feeling is, in fact, part of the filtering process. Step number 2, as you think about going around this counterclockwise fashion, is the planning phase of our process. Now here we're identifying the actions that we need to take and also the order in which we'll need to take them. Having completed that planning phase, continue to move counterclockwise and you hit implementation. So we're ready for the action part of our plan. And frankly, the measure of our likelihood of achieving our goals is based upon not only the actions we're going to take, but also our ability to overcome obstacles that we undoubtedly are going to encounter on our journey during the year. I mean, if there's something other than death and taxes that's a given, it will be the fact that we're going to encounter obstacles as we pursue our goals. All right, we're banging our noses during this implementation phase. Well, we'll also be measuring our progress and determining if we're on course to hit the target or not. And you'll find frequently that it may actually become necessary to reassess, so I'm now at the top of my diagram, but reassess that original goal and original plan to decide if we've got to take some alternative steps. In fact, it may be necessary to perhaps even scrap a goal that we started out with and come up with one altogether new, I should say. And then off around the circle you go again. So with this planning process in mind, let's now talk about some of the individual steps that make up the process. And the first one, this won't be a surprise, will be goal setting. Excuse me. Now our goals, they need to be clearly written. And we can achieve clarity by basing our goals on this SMART acronym. Perhaps many of you have seen this acronym and this technique before, but I'd like to repeat it, and that's simply to spell out the meaning of SMART as being specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So we want goals to be really comprised of all of those elements. And perhaps as an example or two, I might suggest, let's say on the business side of things, an example of a SMART goal could be, I want to acquire 5 new customers for product X, whatever that might be, over the next 6-week period. So given that I know what today's date is, I know what 6 weeks from now is, so I've got a very specific, I can count it, I said the number 5. You'll have to trust me if you will, that this is an attainable goal. Growing my business is a relevant goal. And I've got time boundary on it with whatever that is, the end of February approximately. Let's say it's March the 2nd, just to be specific with a day. Another example, let's say on the personal side of the ledger, could be that I want to achieve the recommended body mass index for my height by year end. So again, specific. I can look up BMI values based on measuring my height. Do I think it's obtainable? Well, I'll let you just decide for yourselves on that without knowing what I look like. I would tell you that it's relevant perhaps, and it's, again, time-bounded. So with SMART goals in mind, I'd like to offer some specific considerations that you can use to help you with your actual goal selection. So this particular slide is identifying a handful of possible directions, I'll call them, that you could be looking. The first one I start with is, what is the company vision that you've established for yourself and your organization? What are your company values? And I just think this is really foundational to running your business. So a great place to be sort of pressing your fingertips together and thinking, all right, with this vision and values in place, what goals are consistent with what it is that I believe? You know, the why I'm in business and what I value about my relationship with employees, with customers, etc. The second point of differentiation, again, is foundational in my mind, and that is, how do I differentiate myself from my competitors? I mean, it's critical that we have a really rock-solid differentiation strategy. But what is it? Well, what are those things that I might need to consider doing in order to achieve that differentiation? How can we be different? So again, a good way to sort of stir the pot and get some ideas going in terms of goal possibilities. Another here, the third point down, you might ask yourself, so what's a single skill that I could acquire or the business could acquire that would have the largest positive impact on our results this year? And what a great place that would be to figure out a goal or 2 or 3. You might also ask yourself, so what's the most valuable use of my time? You know, I've got a unique set of capabilities, and if I was to spend more and more energy devoted to that set of capabilities, what would it do for the business? Well, what are those capabilities? Do they need to be polished? Is there some goal material in there if you were thinking that way? And then my last consideration, is there a goal that perhaps you need to come up with in order to avoid some outcome? I mean, you may be aware that, you know, there's some probability of X, Y, Z occurring, and boy, the last thing I want to have happen is that very thing. Well, perhaps there's some actions you should be looking at based around that thought. So anyway, a couple of ideas there with regards to how you get your mind lubricated, let's say, in terms of some possibilities. And I wouldn't mind just sort of throwing out a little tidbit, a factoid, if you will. I was looking at the American study published actually on the first of the year. It's out of the Journal of Clinical Psychology. Therein they indicate the people who explicitly write down their goals are 1,000% more likely to achieve their goals than those of us who don't explicitly write them down. So the power of writing those goals down is huge. And that study alone should motivate us to write down our goals. Anyway, back to the planning process. What I've got here is an idea with regards to specific construction on goals. So we've talked about how we might wet our minds to what the goals could be. Well, there's a right way, if you will, as to how to write those goals down. The first thought is to produce a goal list of 10. I mean, really put yourself to an exercise of coming up with 10 goals. Write these goals in the first person. I mean, it's first person, singular or plural, but it's I, this, we, this. Put it into the present tense. We're trying to motivate ourselves to achieve these goals. Let's write them as though we've already achieved them. Let's make them positive statements. So an example that's always used here is, rather than saying something, for instance, if I was a smoker and I wanted to quit smoking, well, that's a negative sort of thing in terms of stopping doing something. So we would write it as, I want to be, let's say, nicotine-free. So we're not changing the meaning, but we're trying to write it so that it's got a positive spin to it. Again, trying to help with our personal motivation. The suggestion is also to use active verbs. You know, I achieved, I built, I constructed, I obtained. Verbs that suggest activity. Another thing is to review the list frequently. Build the list frequently. When necessary, change the list. I've got write them down as the final, and you'll notice it's all in caps. It's important. As I've already told you, those of us who write them down, excuse me, have a 10-time greater chance of achieving our goals. Okay, next slide. This is the action planning process revisited. So we've identified goals, we've looked at considerations, we've talked a little bit about how to construct them. Now it's into the planning part of our activity. And we've got to come up with some number of actions that are going to move us towards our goals. And if we don't have the right actions in the right sequence, our chances for success are limited. And I just want to throw a couple of quotations in front of us to underscore that point. The first being, action without planning is the cause of every failure. This comes from a well-known management consultant. You may be familiar with the name Peter Drucker. The second one I find interesting as a Japanese proverb that says, vision without action is a dream. Action without vision is a nightmare. Just, I think, a very vivid way to think about, you know, you really do have to have both the vision, the goal, if you will, in this case, coupled with the action in order to have the achievement that we're all looking for. Okay, so we recognize the significance of actions. Got to be there. We've got to get things going. I've thrown some suggestions up here for you to help guide you in your thinking about action steps. Think about using the 80-20 rule. I don't know if you're familiar with that, perhaps as the Pareto analysis, but in our business, in our personal lives, frequently, if you were to step back and take a look at a given situation, you would find that 80% of some outcome, some result, is probably coming from 20% of your activities. So let's put that in a business context. You'll probably find that 80% of your sales, 80% of your gross profit comes from 20% of your customers. 80% of the product sales themselves come from just 20% of the product offering or the product range that you offer. So that's the 80-20 rule. Does it reveal to you some areas of your business where you could spend more activity in order to produce greater results? In other words, inside that 20% set, Could I spend more time there because it's such a highly leveraged type of activity in terms of my final result? Zero-based thinking. Based on what I know today, would I have done something that I did in the past? Well, depending on your answer, that might guide you again in terms of some actions that you want to take in the future based on current goal sets that you've identified. Another action step consideration is what I refer to here as time management. There could be activities that you should be doing more of, similar to what I said with regards to the Pareto analysis. Perhaps there's some things you should do less of. Maybe there are some things, and this kind of takes me back to the notion of differentiation, but maybe there's some brand new things that you need to find in order to be taking action in that direction. Maybe you have some activities going on in the operation today that you should absolutely stop. So just some considerations again for those action steps that you want to take as you move forward through the year. I've forgotten I broke this into 2 slides. So I've got another comment to make here with regards to priorities. Similar to perhaps the time management, we could think in terms of, gee, there are really 4 ways I can identify priorities. I've got urgent and important things. The house is on fire. We've got to get out. That's urgent and important. Could be a lot of activities that are important. They're going to move your business forward, but they don't have to be done this afternoon. You know, you can wait until next week to start it, and perhaps even wait till the next month. You don't want to lose sight of it. It's important. The last 2 on my list, urgent, not important, neither urgent nor important, those are 2 that perhaps either get delegated or you abandon altogether. My overriding message on action step considerations would be the bottom statement. Be persistent, persevere. And it would bear repeating, actually. Be persistent and persevere. All righty. Next up, this really, in my mind, could be and probably is the most difficult part of both being entrepreneurial and also chasing our dreams. And that is running into obstacles. Frequently, the biggest obstacle that we're going to encounter, I've labeled here as me, me, me. Probably, from a Pareto standpoint, at 80-20% analysis, probably 80% of our obstacles are in fact driven by what resides between our ears in terms of our own thinking. In other words, it's us. And we are going to run into obstacles all the time. A mark of a successful entrepreneur is really how well you can overcome the obstacle, how you devise a strategy to overcome it. But some of the biggest obstacles beyond the me, 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 or part of that really, are fear of failure, fear of rejection, and our own self-doubt. And we've got to think about how we overcome these obstacles. And strategies that you can employ are listed on the screen at the moment. As you can see, talk about identifying our personal constraints. So if you have an honest conversation with the person you see in the mirror, okay, what is it that holds me back? You should know that gaining courage and confidence is going to help you deal with your fear of failure and fear of rejection. And you gain courage and confidence by acquiring additional skill and knowledge. Now, it may be you just have to remind yourself that you have that knowledge, but that's how we can obtain greater confidence, greater courage. It's also helpful to think, if you look at people who are very successful today, they may be your competitors, they may be others, but just reflect on the fact, they were on the bottom. And if I kind of feel like I'm on the bottom, well, take a look around. Everybody started there. And with that in mind, think about mimicking success. Take a look at those people that you deem to be successful. What do they do? Let's copy it. So, we've encountered obstacles. What are we going to do next? Well, the word is measurement. And my little chart here simply says measure, measure, measure. We've got inputs coming into our process, what I would think of as our work process, whatever it is we do inside our businesses. That could be your personal life, actually, as well. You've got inputs coming into that process, and you have outputs. And it is critical that we're measuring our input activities and our output results, because we need to respond to any changes that are occurring in our business environment. We need to respond when we're getting off course with regards to those goals we set up for ourselves. So on the input side, we can identify key performance indicators to measure. On the output side, we can talk about key result indicators. Measure and take action whenever you see a deviation that starts to make you uncomfortable. So there you have it. Action planning is kind of like the story that never ends. It's a process that includes goal setting. You know what's going to have the biggest impact? It includes our action planning, the determination of the right actions in the right sequence, in the right order. And then our implementation phase. And the charge here really is to take action and keep going. Recognize you're going to bump into obstacles. You've got to determine, how do I go over, around, through, or under in order to continue to pursue the goal that I've envisioned for myself. Then we need to measure our results. And as I suggest, keep result indicators on the output side, key performance indicators on the input. And then my final comment is the assess, reassess. How are we doing? Let's revise as necessary. Now, I've seen it stated several times in the past that most small and medium-sized business owners spend more time planning their vacation than they do planning their business. I'd just like to say to everyone that it's our choice to succeed in our business or not, because we control much of what needs to be done in order to be successful. I think there are a lot of people out there that sort of throw up their hands, woe is me, and expect somebody else to deal with their problem, when in fact we are in control of much of what we need to be in control of. And I'd suggest that those holidays that those business owners spend so much time planning could be really terrific if we were to spend some additional quality time planning, acting towards the goals that we've established ourselves for ourselves. Let's be smart about the goals. For that matter, let's be smart about the action steps that we want to take. With that, I've just blown over my time limit a little bit. I'd throw the floor open. Do we have questions or comments?